Good afternoon, everyone. It's Tracy Cromwell here on a beautiful Friday. It's actually a beautiful rainy day in Seattle today. I bet no one would guess that. But anyway, it's still beautiful here. And I am excited to have a very special guest with me today, and Jennifer Loehding. And I want to bring people on this broadcast that are able to help us in all areas of our lives. So I'm an integrative nutrition health coach and also a trainer, personal trainer. So that means I'm going to have guests that can bring something forward for us in our home environment, fitness, health, joy, spirituality, relationships, finances, creativity, social life, career, education, and cooking. And Jennifer, what your background is really taps into many of those things, which we'll be explaining to everybody soon. But Jennifer has an incredible story. She's a mindset coach, a blogger, a speaker, author, and the host of the Starter Girlz Podcast. And within the last half year, this intrepid entrepreneur has written a book and started a podcast. Her memoir, Beat the Toughest Obstacles, highlights the period in her life when she was able to overcome from the pain and frustration that comes with the diagnosis of atypical trigeminal neuralgia. And so she's going to explain to everyone what that is. But she just really pushed hard, and over years of not getting answers from the medical professionals, she decided to take things into her own hands and successfully reversed that horrible diagnosis and illness. And so today she works with people and gives us tips to help us to have exceptional growth. And she's channeled her energy and enthusiasm into the podcast Starter Girlz, which she hosts every Tuesday, which is a really great podcast. I've had the opportunity to listen to a couple of those. And Jennifer likes empowering people to achieve success by helping them recognize sabotaging behaviors, which I think so many of us have, and to acknowledge their source and how to get around them. So we're going to talk about all of that today. So welcome, Jennifer. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and you are in Texas, right?
I am in Texas, and we have rainy weather today as well. I keep thinking the sun's going to pop out, but we had rain yesterday, and I think we got a couple more days of it. So
yeah. It's needed, I guess, too.
Yeah.
So, yes. Yeah. So if you could, I meant to mention this too. So if you're listening on the podcast, these are recorded live and they don't get edited. So sometimes we have like noises in the background, or we may have a dog or a cat, or anything can happen. So if you're listening in the podcast and you hear funny things, it's just because we're live. So anyway, but go ahead, Jennifer, tell us a bit about you and your story.
Yeah, sure. So you said a lot of great things. Thank you. So my, it's interesting. My journey, I feel like we all arrive, where we need to be at the right time. And I feel like my whole journey has really been kind of this testimony to help me get into this space where I need to be to help people. And I had people have asked me, over the years, or, did I have to have these things happen in my life to be able to do what I do? And I say yes, because I had to have the integrity. I had to be able to have something to say, hey, I walked through this fire. How can I show somebody else how to do it? So my journey actually began, I tell people it began many years ago, way back when I went into network marketing back in November of 1999, because I was this super shy, introverted girl who couldn't even get up in front of a group of people and have a conversation and make eye contact, and now people laugh at me and they're like, what? How did that ever happen? But, in January of 2012, I went into the dentist to have a minor procedure done, came out. 5 months later, I was diagnosed with a rare nerve condition that affects the nerves on the left side of my face. And for those people that, most do not know what trigeminal neuralgia is unless they're affected by it or know somebody that has it. And so what I tell people is that things that we take for granted, like eating, drinking, putting your makeup on, brushing your teeth, combing your hair, standing out in the wind, vibration, your car's, vibrating down the road, all of these things would set the left side of my face on fire. And because I had an atypical case, my pain was chronic. It was 24/7. I'd wake up, it was there. I'd go to bed, it was there. There was never a relief period. And so
Mhm.
I went from being this, gal that had this active lifestyle. I had taught aerobics many years, had really not had anything other than migraines in my life, to having this debilitating condition that was confining me to my bed. And so I spent the better part of 4 years in and out of the hospital, doctor's office, working with specialists. Of course, when they can't fix it, what do? They give you an elixir of drugs. And so I was on
Mhm.
opiates and benzos and anti-seizure meds. And so
Mhm.
I did that for about 4 years. And if you ever have known anybody with cancer, I talked about this in my book, because I imagined that was what my life was like. Because I was in so much pain, I was taking so much medication. I was also very sick from all the medication. And
Mhm.
so my
Mhm.
my dietary, my digestive system got messed up, my diet got messed up, everything in my life, my quality of life, everything. And so they ended up, what happened is around around April of 2014 or 2015, I had started kind of doing some research and really looking into some alternative methods, because I knew at this point that the medical system wasn't doing it for me. Like, the medicines were not working. I was
Mhm.
not going to be hooked on opiates for the rest of my life. This part of my life I felt like was over. I had to find a solution. And so I started really digging into food and looking into, correlations between sugar and diet, and ended up doing food logs for about 6 months. During that time, I also had taken up transcendental meditation. I had started looking into acupuncture. So I started looking into all these various holistic ways to heal this pain. And I
Mhm.
went into what, in December of that year, 2015, I went into what would be my final doctor's appointment for this condition. And the PA had come into the room, and I remember her sitting down, and her exact words, she said, "Jennifer, you're a conundrum." And I just remember having this disheartening feeling inside of me, because I'd spent 4 years dealing with this, and not one specialist, not one doctor, not one dentist, not one person knew what to do with me other than to give me
Mhm.
medication. And so I left out of there. And I talk about this in my book about, if you've ever known anybody with depression, it's a very low place to be. That's where I was. It was a do or die. When I came out of there, I knew that I either had to fix this or end it. Like, I wasn't going to continue down the path I was going. And my
Mhm.
kids at that time were pretty young. And so because my quality of life was, being affected, so was theirs. And so
Yeah.
I ended
Yeah.
up going on a holistic route. And, long story short, I tell people there were several things I did, but I ultimately ended up doing a ketogenic diet for 22 plus months, was able to successfully get off all my medication, put the nerve pain into remission. And to this
Mhm.
day, I've been able to remain off my medication. I've been able to keep it under control. And so what I've
Mhm.
really learned in that process is that, given all the tools that we have, the medication, all the lifestyle changes, what really came down to this was my unrelenting determination to find the solution. I did not want to settle for what I was being told, that this
Mhm.
was going to be the way of my life, for the rest
Mhm.
of my life. I was determined to figure out a way to basically circumvent that, get around that, and so
Yeah.
that's what I really do, is I try to help people take all these things that I've learned in this process. Of course, I've, developed other things that have come along the way that I recognized helped me get through that, and really teach people, how do you put those practices into your life so that you can find that harmony. Hopefully you never have to go through something like I did. You can
Mhm.
bypass that, but if you
Yeah.
do, you know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think about something like that, and I hear stories like yours so often too, when you've been told, being told you're a conundrum or there's nothing they can do. I had that with my knee, a knee injury, MRIs, everything under the sun showed nothing was wrong, but I had excruciating pain just trying to get in and out of a car, and so you feel really lost at that point. I can only imagine how you felt. And um, so I really acknowledge that aspect. I never gave up. I kept looking, and even though it took me a long time to find somebody that could really help me figure it out, I would love to tell everybody, just don't stop, keep seeking answers, because Jennifer is a great example of, being that seeking, learning about your body, figuring out how it works and what does it need. And yeah, it's incredible what your body can do. It's absolutely incredible once you can figure that out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Go ahead.
I was going to say, I remember this moment, you know, I was cleaning up in my bathroom and I had I've had several people ask me, you know, how was it that I was able to stay? Because when I talk about doing the ketogenic diet, and I'm not saying that's a catch-all for everybody, that's not a cure-all for every single person, but for me, it was. Getting the sugar out of my diet was instrumental in helping me. But it wasn't until around 11 or 12 months before I even saw improvement in what I was doing. And so people have asked me, you know, how was I able to commit to that and stay with that despite not seeing evidence that it was working until that time? Well, my answer to that was I didn't have a choice. I didn't see an alternative at that point. I had done everything that I knew to do. That was the last straw. I had already taken all these foods out of my diet. What else is there? I mean, I was down to meat and veggies. I mean, what do you do at that point, right? And so there was that part of it, you know, that really just staying committed to the process and knowing that I had to do this to finish that out. But also just knowing that, you know, you said the body's miraculous, and I believe that. I think I just always feel like there's a solution, and it's just finding that right fit, but not giving up. Just don't give up.
Yep. Don't give up. And it's great you say that. I think about when I, in my book as well, I talk about that. Just don't give up. You know, if you have that voice inside of you, that inner self or your spirit, whatever you would like to call that, that's just saying, don't give up. Listen to that. And then you know, the fact that, again, be in it for the long journey, in case it is a long journey. For example, my knee, I injured it in 2005, and I didn't get real solutions for it till a couple of years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it was seeking and trying to figure it out. And then I became pre-diabetic and was diagnosed in 2006. And it took me about 4 some years to reverse it. But then it took me some time even after that to figure out what my body, what foods were best for my body and helped it the most, you know? And so again, like you, it was just nothing like what you've gone through, but, you know, just taking that time and you're now working with people in their careers and coaching them and all of that. So what would you say, you know, to somebody I guess in general, just other obstacles, some of the mindset tools you use or things like that to help someone stay in it? Stay in it.
That's my favorite part to talk about. What do you do to stay in it, right? The mindset.
Stay in it.
I love talking mindset. Well, you know, I think I talk about this often. I had a gal that came on my podcast a while back, and one of the things she was talking about, she does soul types, and she basically unpacks. It's kind of like the DISC, the Myers-Briggs, all of that. And one of the things she was talking about, I had her unpack mine on the show, which was, you know, really interesting because you got to be vulnerable. And you're like, what are they going to say about you on the podcast, right? And so she came in and she said, one of the things about me is that I look at situations as there's going to be muck that's going to be in the middle of them. There's going to be problems and we're going to deal with it. I don't look at any situation and go, you know, we're not going to have any problems. Let's do it. And I don't look at any situation and go, oh, we might have problems. Let's don't do it. I look at every situation and go, we know there's going to be problems. And I call them potholes. We're going to have to get through the potholes, just like we drive our car every single day through potholes. Right. And so I think, you know, when I talk about this with people, I think that just really coming to terms, first of all, with the idea that anything you do, there's going to be a hardship. There's anything worth having, doing, creating, making, manifesting. There is going to be a hardship. There's going to be something that you have to take away from this. But if you go into every opportunity and experience looking at it from a growth aspect, meaning there's going to be something gained no matter what happens, whether you fail or lose, there's something going to be gained. It takes the pressure off your back. You no longer go into this going, but what if I fail? You go into this going, if I fail, it's okay because I'm going to learn something in the process. I'm going to learn maybe I don't do that again. Maybe I need to work harder. Maybe I need to read more, meet more people. You're going to go into it with a growth mindset. And so that's really, I think the biggest key is just going into this with the idea that there is a solution. You're probably going to have to weather some garbage and you got to be okay weathering the garbage. I mean, that's the one thing I say, you know, after having gone through this crisis in my life, I have a completely new lease on life. I look at things very differently. And I tell people, I'm not going skydiving. I'm not even going to justify that. I don't want to do it. And I just don't want to do it because I don't like heights and I don't really have a desire to jump out of an airplane. But if I want to do something and I really want to do something, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do
Mhm.
it. And I'm not going to get hung up on all the what ifs. I'm going to look at it and go, no matter what happens in that journey, I'm going to gain something from it.
Yeah.
I would say that's instrumental. But, on top of all that, I mean, I have all these practices that I do, like affirmations, I think are important, and reading, expanding your mind. Who's in your circle? Who are you communicating with on a daily and weekly basis? We are meant to connect. We are meant to connect with people. And so often when we're going through crisis, what do? We isolate. We put ourselves in a hole, right? Because we don't want to deal with people because we're dealing with our own pain or whatever that is. When we really need to be connecting, because it's through connecting that we heal.
Yeah.
So your circle of influence, gratituding for me was huge. That helped me. It was instrumental in helping me get through a lot of my stuff and really learning how to celebrate the wins. But I think that first step has to be really you accepting that there's going to be stuff in the middle, and then really just having that unwavering determination that you're going to do it. You're going to make it happen.
Yeah, and it's interesting you said that. I have a sticky note on my other screen, but it says success risks ego only, and that concept of I love what you just said. Is the brain can be sitting there going, but what if I fail? What if it doesn't work? What if I eat the wrong thing? What if someone laughs at me? What if someone doesn't agree with me? All this noise comes up. And it's that one part of your brain that, that ego part that's so fragile, and getting it to realize you're not going to die. You're not going to, by stepping out and growing as a human being or trying something new. How do I want to say it's that pushing through that fear is incredible. And then also, the other thing that was really hard for me was I was always afraid to make mistakes. I grew up like that, all through school. My prior career was purchasing management, estimating, and construction, so I was very much, no mistakes ever, so I get into entrepreneurial world, and it is interesting. My brain thinks I'm going to die like every day if I do a wrong post, or you know what I mean? It's really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
And just, and I realize it's learning that, that the concept of growing as a business or as a person is actually a really good thing. And teaching it that was really challenging, so yeah, I love that. I just happened to hear this morning, it's his name's Darren Daly. He used to be Darren Hardy. He used to be the editor of Success Magazine. So I get his morning Darren Dailies. And today, again, it was, the top 10, things that most successful people do. And one is they fail often. They fail all the time, every day. What did you fail at? What did you push yourself? So I love that you're saying that, because and again, for those watching about me because of food and diet, you fail all the time, every day, learning about how your body works. And so releasing that fear of failure,
100%.
it's like invigorating. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, Tracy, that's how we build our confidence. I was listening to you and you were talking about being a perfectionist. I'm a perfectionist. And that was really one of the hardest things for me because, I'm a accounting background, which means I'm very meticulous. Like I used to do newsletters and I couldn't get anybody to do them because I was so worried nobody could do them as perfect as me. Now I would give anything to have anybody do all of that, social media, all of it, do every piece of it. Right?
Please.
I just don't have the energy to do it all. But, I think one of the biggest things, I would tell you, one of the biggest lessons I've learned is just to really to laugh at myself, to be okay with all the screw ups and the flaws and the quirks and the dumb things I say. And how many times can I say on the podcast, that's awesome or so good? Like how many times can I say that word, those phrases?
Yeah.
Like, just being able to be okay with who you are. But I think that is a process you have to learn to get to. Like some people, I guess, have that very early on, but the rest of us, I think we have to learn to acquire that. And I think that comes from making those mistakes, having those failures over and over and over and going, okay, well, I screwed up on that. That doesn't define me. Get up, Jennifer, and go back at it and plug away. You keep moving. And so that's really how I do it every day. And, I was coaching someone today and I was telling her about just really if you're the lone wolf, if you're the only one out there excited about what you're doing, whatever that is, I don't know what that is for you, but you're out there and you're the only one doing it, do it anyways. Get excited about it, because eventually when you keep doing it over and over and over, you're building your confidence, building your belief. Those around you are going to catch on. They're going to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I wanted to come back to, as you mentioned, we're social creatures. And so a lot of times when we make mistakes or we're going through tough times, we will isolate ourselves. And I remember being so isolated in my own mind all the time, because I was always afraid of being who I really was, or I was so afraid of making a mistake, or I didn't want to admit that I wasn't perfect if I was going through something. And it was very isolating. And what I found was, and, just to validate what, to everybody exactly what you're saying, was once I started talking about it, being open about my failures or open about things, I realized I wasn't alone. And I had isolated myself. I had put myself in this area of what I was carrying heavy shame regarding my food, or, if I wasn't perfect with whatever it was. And again, being courageous and being willing to not isolate, but talk about things. There's something that was so empowering in that, and it just helped me a lot. I was like, oh my gosh, my brain realized I would still have friends if I wasn't perfect,
Right. I know it's hard. I'm with you on that 100%. It's hard to be vulnerable sometimes and really just let your guard down and open the doors to, because you have I talk about when I was in my other direct selling company. I started in Houston back when my oldest daughter, and she's 24 now, she was 2 at the time, and I became a leader in that company the last 2 years I lived in Houston. And then when I moved to Dallas in 2004, I moved here in a leadership position. So everybody that had known me here in that company knew of me in that leadership position. And when I had to step down in 2007, it was 2017 when I stepped down, and I did it because of my health, because it became an integrity thing for me. Mm-hmm. When I stepped down, my identity had been tied to that. And so really, it was so hard for me to be, because that's how they saw me. That's the way they saw me. And to be able to step down and come back and say, okay, I can't do this any longer. I can't uphold this image any longer. I can't even get out of bed, let alone try to motivate you people every day. You know what I mean? So I just got to get myself back together, to be a human again, But it really is that being vulnerable and being open is what people really want to see. And that's something I still struggle with a lot of that, because I have high expectations for myself. I have high expectations for the people around me. So I totally get where you're coming from on that.
Well, I love what you just said too, because, I had been in construction and in the industry for a really long time. And then when the housing crisis happened, I was able to weather my job through that until 2008 when I got laid off. But because I had all my identity and self-worth was based on my job, I went into a horrible tailspin, because I had, again, that's what brought my worthiness. And so the lesson that I got from that, after I went through all my mess and emotional challenges and trying to pick myself back up, was that, what are your thoughts on that? We will so much put our worth, our self-worth, our image, everything based on our jobs, and you hit it on the nose. It struck me, immediately. What did you do? You're just like, okay, how did you go through even just that process of changing your mindset as to where your self-worth was really at as a person?
Having gone, I will say, go back to my medical condition too. My identity was tied to that as well. Like when I came out of that, came out of that whole thing, I was like, oh my gosh, I spent 4 years doing this now. Now what do I do? I no longer am in pain. I'm no longer struggling to get out of bed. What do I do with that? Right. Mm-hmm. That is kind of where I think led me into all my coaching that I got into, because I think I shared this on other podcasts. What I recognized in my own behavior is that I had a repeated pattern of chasing goals and chasing crises. And what I mean by that is I'm an achiever. I'm competitive. I'm a go-getter. I'm a trailblazer. I go after things. I make them happen. And if I say I'm going to do something, we're going to do it. And so what I find is that is the way I work. Like I will be in the middle of a massive goal. We're going to do it, and make this happen. And it happens. And then I would get to the end of that and I'd be like, okay, that's over. Now I'm depressed. What do I do? So then what happens? There's a pattern. I either go back into another goal or I go into a tailspin depression and I get into crisis. And so when I came out of this whole like medical thing, I started putting some pieces together and really recognizing that this was kind of a pattern that was going on in my life. And so that's when I kind of dove into the coaching. So I tell people I didn't go on a sabbatical because I was still having to make money so I could like pay for things. But I really went on this whole spiritual journey, soul searching for myself to really dig in and find out what is going on? Like, what are all these limiting beliefs and these things I'm harboring from when I'm younger or whenever that I'm not letting go of it, that are continually playing out in my life every single day. And so that process has been, I tell people it was not an overnight. I've been working on this part alone just for the last 6 years, really working on it. But I feel like I've gotten in a great place where now I recognize those behaviors. I recognize the mindset. I recognize when I'm traveling down the wrong path. But getting through that was really just going back to those basic habits that I do every day in my life. The reading and the connecting and the affirmations and the gratitude. Over and over and over, having a great mantra. My mantra is what I say on my podcast each week. And do I use it? Yes. When I need to use it, I use it. If I find that, my headspace is traveling down a negative rabbit hole, I'm going to interrupt that thought pattern and I'm going to change the direction because I'm not going to watch where it's going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like you're acknowledging though that you're having that thought and then you're rerouting it. And then moving forward, past that. And I love that, acknowledge the thought or the feeling because we have them. 100%. So we can't say that they don't exist. That just kind of stuffs them down and we don't deal with them, but saying, oh, I see you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see you.
I'm like, Jennifer, you're doing it again. You need to stop that sucky thinking right now. Like, knock it off. We're not going there today. Hello.
Yeah.
What's it? But if you think about like, my health crisis, I'm not going to go as far as to say I caused that, but I did play a role in it. And when I was sitting in a holistic practitioner's office back in 2016, late that year. And I remember him asking me the question, Jennifer, what did you do to cause this? And I was so mad. Like, I'm like, excuse me? Like, what are you talking about? I went into the dentist office, got a filling redone on a back tooth. This is like a stupid baby minor procedure. And I come out 5 months later and I have this condition. Fast forward when I was writing my book, after I'd gone through some of this coaching and really started recognizing this pattern of behavior, I looked back at where my life was at that time. My kids were little at the time. I was homeroom mom, PTA mom for all of them. I was on the field trips with all of them. I was a troop leader for my oldest and Girl Scouts. We were doing cross country, soccer, lacrosse, orchestra, piano. And so I had my kids floating all over. Then I was spread so thin and I was running a business. And so we were living in the fast food lane, constantly. And that was my life. And so I really think that was my wake up call to say, hey, Jennifer, you were meant to do more here. This is not the way you should be living. You're serving no one well by doing this. You might be giving your kids everything they need right now, letting them do everything, but you can't keep this up. You've got to change the way you're living, redirect, and take that so that you can help other people. And so I feel like there's no accidents. I feel like all these things, they happen for reasons. There's lessons to be learned. And that goes back to what we were talking about going into, any experience with that open mindset that there's something to be gained.
Yeah. And I think me too, if I had not had my experiences, I always knew, but I wandered off this path. I always knew I wanted to be in the health industry somehow, or I was always fascinated by it. And I kind of, let the wind blow and it would blow me around and it would change. And I just so it was interesting. And I took it as a message from the universe. I wouldn't listen in regard to what I was putting in my body. I just figured it should accept whatever I put in it. And it was its fault if it didn't look the way it should, and then I knew in my gut, I just had this thing, this gut of just stress and angst, as I moved on in my career, that something was amiss. And I just didn't think I could make a change. I just didn't think I was allowed, or that I was allowed to take care of myself. So it took, I've always been this a 2x4, just hit me upside the head in my career and my health, because I was so bullheaded.
We all are.
So bullheaded. I wouldn't listen. But I really am grateful to this day of what I went through, even though it was just so, I don't want to have to do it again, but I grew a lot as a person, through that, and yeah, and it sounds like, with you too, and maybe if, we can leave people with this thought, the obstacles we're faced with are, yes, they're hard, they're difficult, but again, what can we learn from it that will help us in the future, and that housing crisis helped me get through the COVID crisis so much better. I did not handle the housing crisis well. I did not. I just didn't. But because I had made it through it and I knew even though how hard it was. And so those obstacles, like you're teaching people, are what the potholes.
We get through them every day. I always joke and say, you don't pull off the side of the road and say, I'm never going to drive my car again because I just hit a pothole, right? Like you get in your car and you get down the street because you got places to be. That's how you do life.
That's right.
Places to be.
That's right. So, oh my goodness, we already are at, let's see, I just saw the clock here. We are already at 30 minutes. It goes so fast. And so Jennifer, I did put your website in the post, but talk a little bit about your podcast and other areas that people can find you and, follow you and connect with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So startergirlz.com is where the podcast is. And my partner, Brianna Relentless, and I do the podcast together. I just brought her on, super excited to work with her. She's amazing. We're having such a great time on that show working together. But you can also go to my other website, which is Jennifer Loehding, and my name's on there. So it's pretty easy. It's just jenniferloehding.com. And that's where you'll actually can see my story in there, a little bit about my background, and everything's linked in there as well. But I'm also on social media. So Instagram, Facebook, I have a YouTube page, all of it's, Starter Girlz or Jennifer Loehding.
Great. And what would you like to leave? Another thought, or what's your biggest message for everybody before we part?
Yeah, I love this one. So when I was in my network marketing company, I just closed the doors to that company after 21 years. And so I can talk about this because I was a longevity person with that company as well. But one of the things I learned in there from a mentor was never take advice from someone that you wouldn't trade places with. And so I've always lived by that principle of, if I'm going to take advice from you, you better be worthy for me to take it from you, because I'm not if you're not. And really just take that. But, it's like if you're going to go run a marathon, find the person who's run a marathon and ask them what they did to run the marathon. Don't ask the person who hasn't even put a pair of tennis shoes on how to run a marathon, because they're going to give you 100 reasons why not to do that. And apply that to all areas of your life. If you want to do something, find somebody who has succeeded before you and ask them what they did.
I love it. I just got chills literally when you said.
I did too.
It was like,
got me all fired up.
Yes. Anyway, well, Jennifer, thanks so much for being on. I really appreciate it, and I know this podcast and video cast is going to help a lot of people. And so don't go anywhere. But let's say goodbye to everybody else, and have a great weekend, everybody. And we'll talk to you all soon. Take care.